Today, my guest is Scott Bossman. He is a physical therapist, husband, and a father of four. And after realizing his physical therapist career was not going to provide him the financial freedom he sought, he found land flipping with Mark Podolsky and the Land Geeks program. And in just 3 years, he was able to create enough passive income to replace his physical therapy salary and quit his full-time position. And today, Scott is a member of the Land Geek team, and he's passionate about sharing his journey into the world of raw land flipping in hopes of inspiring others to step into their side hustle and achieve their financial freedom. And in just a minute, we're going to talk with Scott about how he achieved his financial freedom through land flipping. And but first, I want to remind everybody, if you like the show CREPN Radio, please let us know. We would love to hear from you. You can comment, you can like, you can share. And as always, we hope that you'll subscribe. Also, if you'd like to check out how handsome our guests are, be sure to check out our YouTube channel. And you can find us on YouTube at Commercial Real Estate Pro Network. With that, I want to welcome my guest, Scott. Welcome to CREPN Radio.
Thanks very much, Darren. Thank you for having me.
Scott, I'm looking forward to talking with you today. Before we get started, if you could take just a minute and share with the listeners a little bit about your background.
Yeah, I'd be glad to. So I was born in South Dakota. I spent most of my life here in the Northern Plains states. Went to a small liberal arts college in Iowa called Luther College, and eventually went to physical therapy school. I knew healthcare was something I always wanted to do. I grew up in a family. My stepdad was a doctor. My mom was a nurse. I had other people in the healthcare field, and it just kind of encompassed a lot of our discussions at dinner time and that type of thing. And I always had an interest in science and helping people, and thought it was the best path. And for a long time, it was the best path for me. I was, a physical therapist for almost 20 years before I discovered this niche in real estate investing. But really, I just come from a family of really hard workers, people who trade their time for dollars in all of these different careers: doctors, lawyers, nurses, farmers, construction workers. My dad was a construction worker. All of my grandparents were farmers. So it's very customary in my family to work hard. And that's what I thought I needed to do. So that's what I did for a long time. I did that for 16, 17 years. I don't know if it was a midlife crisis or what, but about the time I turned 40, I turned over in bed and just thought, man, I'm just spinning my wheels. I feel like I'm not getting anywhere. I'm married. I have 4 boys. And with a physical therapist salary, you wouldn't think it would be hard to put food on the table, but that's about where we were. So it was very stressful. And my career, although I love patient care, as you can imagine, the healthcare environment can be quite toxic at times, especially in the last few years. So that just culminated in a lot of stress for me, and working 50-hour weeks, feeling like I wasn't getting anywhere, and really looking at a stagnant salary, pay freezes and that type of thing over years, getting a 1% raise, and just realizing I needed something else in my life. So I went on kind of a discovery, a journey of self-discovery, and tried to figure out what we wanted to do. After reading every Rich Dad, Poor Dad book there was, and listening to a lot of other books about real estate and that type of thing, I found Mark Podolsky by accident on a podcast, and I thought, this sounds amazing. I came home and told my wife, I think this is what we need to do. And went, kind of I didn't burn my bridges, because land investing, the great thing about it is the barrier for entry is quite low. You don't need a ton of money. You don't need a ton of time. So the risk in getting started was actually quite low. But we went into land investing, and as you mentioned earlier, just by taking massive action and doing what I needed to do, I replaced my income in 2 years. I was able to quit my job in 3 years. And it truly was a side hustle for me, maybe 10 hours a week on top of what I was doing. I carved that time out, and we made it happen. So.
Awesome. No, I'm a fan of Mark's. He's been, or I've talked to him a couple of times here on the podcast, and he's just a real energetic guy, and great story. Um, so let me ask you. So you mentioned that you kind of had this aha, whether you want to call it a midlife crisis or not, but just the W-2, there were limitations. You were basically limited by based on what others were willing to pay you, essentially for your time. Um, when you had this aha, was it a I'm not going to be able to get where I want to go, or was there an underlying theme other than just the struggle, like you mentioned, even just to put food on the table? I mean, just the constraints.
There were a number of things for me. There was the immediate feeling of uh, just I mean, not necessarily going into debt, but struggling to make all ends meet and paying bills and getting food on the table. There was the retirement horizon, right? Turning 40, knowing that in 15 to 20 years, I need to have a good cushion for retirement. So there were definitely the financial aspects of things were a big stressor at the time. The other thing though was the lack of time freedom and the fact that I really was trading my time for dollars. My boys were growing quickly. My wife didn't see me much, and it was I had no sense of time freedom. So that was another motivator for getting into something like this, so that I would be able to have a little bit more control over my time, a little bit more control over my financial destiny, and be able to spend time, with my loved ones. Maybe teach them what I'm doing, which is what I've done as well with my kids, which has been very valuable, and experience freedom on both those fronts.
Awesome. So as you got into your search for something different,
Mhm.
um, what was it that you saw with the land flipping that appealed?
Yeah, we were actually on the verge of going into multifamily housing. We were on the verge of purchasing a duplex when I heard Mark's podcast, and I thought, uh, number one, I in patient care I read people really well. I could just tell that Mark was really genuine, and he it was just a great podcast to listen to. And I thought, wow, this sounds so much easier than what we are about to do. You can, a land flipping business can start cash flowing very quickly. You don't need $30,000 to start. You can literally start this with a couple $1,000s. You can start this with no money. It sounded like something I could do. I'm a good learner, a good researcher, a good planner, and just sounded like something that was more up my alley than going into multifamily housing, where there can be a lot of emergencies, right? I have friends in multifamily housing. They're getting up at 3 in the morning. They're going to court to evict people. um, there are no land emergencies, and that was not really apparent when I got into it, but it's been apparent now for the last couple of years. Out of the hundreds of deals I've done, I've had like two minor issues that cost me a couple $100. And compare that to my other real estate investor friends, it's very low stress in that regard. So uh, that's what I loved about it, and I loved Mark's mindset. I get this question all the time because I talk to a lot of people about this business. Why would Mark want to teach everybody to do this and introduce competition into the environment? Well, Mark's very much about the abundance mindset, and the raw land market in these United States is so absolutely massive. It's really hard to wrap your head around. And therefore, Mark has no limitation in teaching people to do this, because not many people are doing it. Number one, and number two, even if we teach a lot of people to do this, there's going to be a lot of a lot of land left over for sure. There's going to be a lot of land for everybody. So I love that mindset of his, and entering his community and being a part of his community now for the last 4 years. I mean, Mark and his training uh, have Mark has retired so many people, and people, and now to be able to, in my role with Land Geek, I kind of facilitate that happening. So if you were to come to me and say, I want to do this, I tell you how to do it, and I help facilitate that. And that's really rewarding as well, because I get them on the path that I've already experienced.
Yeah, I'm just thinking here with Mark. I remember his system to me was uber impressive, just based on how he had truly systematized it. I- are you? Did you create your own niche that you're going after then, and basically, are you able to leverage his kind of a system approach, or do you have? Can you kind of walk us through kind of a month of what you're doing?
Sure. The great thing about land investing is it's very repeatable, very redundant. Once you learn how to do a deal, you can just rinse and repeat and do it all over again. So, but the most important aspect of our business is mailing. We target all of our um, or we get all of our properties by mailings. We mail property owners who are um, they may or may not be distressed. They may have back taxes. They may just live away from the property. They may have owned the property for 30 years and they don't know how to get rid of it. So we show up in their mailbox as a solution for how to get rid of the property. And essentially, there's just a negotiation process on the front end. We do our due diligence. We agree on a price. We purchase the land, and then start marketing it right away. A lot of our properties we can sell in 30 days or less. Um, a lot of people think raw land, that, or they assume that I'm flipping raw land, that we're buying very expensive land parcels and flipping them for much more expensive. But the truth of the matter is, my bread and butter deal is like $1,500. I love that purchase point. I'll buy a property for $1,500, and then I'll sell it for 4,500 cash, or maybe $6,000 to $7,000 on terms. They sell very quickly. So the power in this business is velocity. Um, so you can do a number of deals like that and really move the needle quickly. There's a gentleman in our community who is over $60,000 a month passive income that's his average purchase price on property is $1,700.
Wow.
So it's absolutely phenomenal. But the biggest thing in this business is for me, a month uh, in land investing is just being consistent with my mailing on the front end, because that brings in the deal flow. The deal flow solves everything, and then also being consistent with my marketing. So we have systems in place for both our mailing and our marketing. The great thing about this business is so much of it can be automated, so much of it can be delegated to get to the point where you really have a passive income machine. And that's Land Geek's mantra. We want to teach you something that brings in passive income, and we want to show you how to create a machine so you aren't having to work so hard. So you're not working in the business. And that's kind of what we do.
No, that's awesome. I appreciate you kind of walking us through that.
Yeah.
Curious on on the mailing. I think you touched on the two things that I would think are key. The mailing's going to be the getting out in front of people and presenting your opportunity, uh, and the kind of the constant marketing. That's going to be your pipe, right? I mean, if you
Mhm.
keep that machine going, you're going to have opportunities come in. Do you have any kind of a sense of the numbers of pieces that go out as to opportunities that come in and end up closing? I mean, is it that kind of simple math? I mean, it's like if you send out, I don't know what the number is, 1,000 or whatever.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a great question. We do have this kind of down to a science. It does depend a little bit on the area that you work in, but what we find is that in these vast counties out west, the equation is pretty much the same. Um, you're in the right market if you send out 100 mailings and you get maybe a 3% response rate. Now, those could be angry sellers as well. But you're able to purchase one property for every 100 mailings. That's what we're shooting for. There are a couple. There's a gentleman in our community that's very successful. He has a 1.7% response rate, or I'm sorry, 1.7% buy rate. I would say my buy rate's about 1%. So we're looking at purchasing one property out of every 100, and that's the great thing. You can start with what we teach people is to start with 100 a week. Start with 100 a week. You don't need thousands and thousands of dollars to send out thousands and thousands of mailings. And that's actually, we recommend you don't do it that way, because you want to make sure that you're very careful with your county research. Your county research has to be surgical in this business. You have to figure out where there's a good market for buying and selling land. And, we teach you how to do that. You can find a lot of information online how to do that. So the biggest thing is county research. And then the next most important thing is just to be consistent with those mailings. Consistently sending out 100 a week. And if you can be diligent and disciplined enough to do that, and you get your numbers on with your pricing and you're in the right county, man, you can make hay in this business for sure.
So when you first started 4 years ago, uh, what, how long did it take you to land your first deal?
Yeah, it's a great question. Let's see, I got Mark's, his basic training kit is called the Investor Toolkit. I got that. I digested that very quickly. I think I sent out my first mailings within a few weeks of getting that. So bottom line is I purchased my first property about 6 weeks after I got Mark's basic training program. And this may sound funny to a lot of real estate investors out there, but for me, this was a big deal. I purchased a 2.5 acre property for $700. And 2 weeks later, I sold it for $2,800 cash. So that for me right there was just huge proof of concept. I just tripled my money on a land deal, and I'm a physical therapist. Like, I don't have an ounce of business or real estate or anything in my body, sales or marketing. I'm not an economist, nothing. And I took $700 and I turned it into $2,800. That's when I knew I was onto something. And shortly after that, I went into one-on-one coaching with the Land Geek program, which is a year-long intensive process to get you to the point where you have a machine up and running. And in that first year, we bought and sold 30 properties. In the second year, we about doubled that, and our business has continued to grow since.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah.
So so year three, or tell me, when were you able to replace your income? And then I think, did you kind of continue on the PT path for a while before you tell us
Yeah.
that way?
Yeah. At about my 2-year anniversary in land investing, I had exceeded my income with passive. I had exceeded my income as a physical therapist. I knew I needed to work a little bit longer before I was comfortable in hanging up the cleats in that department. But so about another year and 3 months, I was a PT, and then we had a very successful third year in our business, and then it just got to the point where I kind of woke up one day and I realized, I'm spending 80% of my time in something that is yielding 20% of the results, and I need to flip that. So I remember having a discussion with Mark and saying, wow, Mark, I'm really nervous about this. And he said, Scott, how many times have you burned your ships in this? You need to burn them again. So I burned them again and quit my job. And it's been absolutely amazing. Now I work my land business from home. My wife helps a little bit. I can put my sweatpants on in the morning and bring my boys to school, come back home, drink my coffee, work in land for a few hours. And then, this last summer, it was really apparent to me. It was my first summer off in probably, 20, 25 years, something like that. To be able to go golfing with my son on a Monday morning and fishing with my other son on a Thursday morning, that for me is what really hit home how amazing this business is for me and so many others. For me, it's more about the time than it is the money, for sure. And so that's what I've experienced as a result. And now I still am a PT. I'm going into the clinic today for 4 hours, but I work 4 to 10 hours a week as a physical therapist. I enjoy doing that. I still enjoy helping people. I'm a clinical educator, so I like to go in and, if there happens to be a student in the building, I'll pull them aside and say, let's go over some things. And so I'm getting the best of all worlds right now. And it's a great life right now.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Let me ask you. So, you made I mean, you kind of graduated into it until you realized that, like, gosh, I really don't need to do this one full time. Recognizing your time there. What What do you think the challenge is for most people? Is it that they don't realize that there's no silver lining to what they're doing, or that they're not paying attention, or is there just fear of the unknown? Have you any ideas on that, as far as, because I mean, you realized that what you were doing wasn't going to get you where you wanted to go, and I think
Right.
that so much of the way I think education, and like you mentioned, your family, hard work, you work hard and and you'll retire, and in the path. I wonder if you could speak a little bit more to what you see, um, or even kind of was there any challenge to that, I guess, is where I'm trying to, like, get.
Sure. I don't like being uncomfortable, or I didn't, 4 years ago. Um, and that, I would say, I talk to a lot of people who are interested in getting into this business, and I would say that in my conversations with people, there are a number of people who are fearful of the unknown, of doing something that they've never done before, and there is some discomfort associated with any new venture, right? Um, and I think what I've come to find out is that that discomfort is essential in order for you to move the needle, and become better in whatever realm of life that you want to be better in. Some people, they just they can't tolerate that discomfort. So I think that that's the biggest thing is, you need to realize that that discomfort is a good thing. When you're moving the needle in your life, if you feel some discomfort, that's going to motivate you to do better. So, I've felt that so many times in this business. I felt that when I first ordered Mark's Investor Toolkit. I felt that on my first mailing. I felt that when I bought my first property. I felt that when I went into coaching. So looking back over the last 4 years, there've been all these uh, peaks and valleys of feeling comfortable and then feeling discomfort. But to me, that what really is apparent is the upward trend. And this is like with patient care and physical therapy too. People get better and they get a little worse, and they get better and they get a little bit worse. What matters is, are you better now than you were a month ago? And that's kind of the mantra I use with my land investing business. I try to sit down every month and say, am I better now than I was a month ago? And if the numbers say yes, and my time says yes, and that type of thing, we're on the right track. If the numbers don't say yes, then I need to adjust. But I'd say that's the biggest thing I notice, is that it's just the fear of unknown, especially for people who maybe aren't uh, business oriented, or in marketing or sales or that type of thing. To step into a completely different realm, I think is the biggest fear that people have getting into this. But the
Uh,
but the valuable thing is, we have this down to a science. It really is a recipe, and if you follow the recipe, and that's where you get strength, or that's where you kind of calm your fears, is just by following the recipe. You follow this recipe, and you will be doing land deals.
that's awesome. Um, Trying to think here. So you got in, you worked it. Now you get your time back. You're coaching. Um, what would you say? I mean, you mentioned kind of the uncomfortable. Is there a push point? Is there like a nudge other than just the uncomfortable? Is it basically, look? It, I guess what I'm trying to ask is, like, because I feel like there's just like this wake up of just that when you look at, the one thing was kind of the uncomfortable on how you transition. But I'm trying to think, what do you say to people that, eh, when they're looking at their future and where they're going to end up? I mean, because I just look at the limitations of a W-2 and how little
Hmm.
that really that there is, and recognizing that. I'm do people, when they come to you, are they aware of that? Is that something that they're concerned about?
Yeah, I think a majority of people that come to us, they realize, just like I realized 4 years ago, that they're not on the best path. Um, and this path has been ingrained in all of us in this country, that you need to work hard and trade your time for money, and you can retire when you're 65 and maybe 75 now. I mean, people work into their 80s and 90s. My grandma, God bless her, she just retired from Walmart full time a couple of years ago. She was 88. She's working full time. These are, now, she wasn't stressed for money, but she was just, she comes from a society where people work their entire lives. Um, but I'd say majority of people I talk to, they're working their entire lives, and they're not feeling like they're getting ahead. The great thing about Land Geek is we provide you a solution to get to the point where you're not trading your time uh, nearly as much for money, and that you get to the point where you are more financially secure, so you can enjoy life, and you don't have to work that hard.
No, I love it. I appreciate you kind of talking a little bit about that, because I think that you mentioned, there's kind of that clock, whether it be your 40 or 50 or whatever the age is that when you look at the plan that's been provided for you, and you run the numbers, and is this going to add up? I mean, I think that's really a question, and I see it when I talk to people. It doesn't matter what income bracket they're in. They could be a 6-figure plus or more. But I think a lot of times what people end up doing is spending, they spend what they get, kind of thing, and aren't fully cognizant of how are the numbers going to add up, kind of thing. So appreciate you talking about that.
Yeah.
Scott, if we could, I want to shift gears here for a second. I mentioned to you earlier, by day I'm an insurance broker, and we work with our clients to assess risk and determine what to do with risk and risk management. And there's 3 strategies that we typically consider. The first is, can we avoid the risk? Second option is, can we minimize the risk? And then the third option is, can we transfer the risk? And that's what an insurance policy is. You're basically transferring the risk. And what I've been asking my guest here on CREPN Radio, if they can take a look at what their model is, how they operate, and what they see is the biggest risk. And so, if you're willing, what I'd like to do is ask you, Scott Bossman, what is the biggest risk?
I'll give you a multi-part answer, if that's okay. It'll
Yeah,
be short.
yeah,
So I think of this in a couple ways. The biggest risk in my land investing business is not mailing and not marketing. So if I can be consistent in those 2 things, um, I will be successful in this business. And that's something that we iterate to our students over and over and over again. Do not stop mailing. That's your deal flow. Do not stop marketing. Those are your sales. So the consistency in those things, and not being consistent is the biggest risk. As far as a technical standpoint from land investing is actually very low risk, which is one of the reasons people love it so much. There are no land emergencies, like I said earlier. So you know uh, that can be covered with like an umbrella policy in your business, in case you do happen to have somebody that you bought a property or sold a property to, and they want to go out to your land to camp on it or that type of thing. Mark recommends having some type of umbrella policy for your land investing business for your properties. Otherwise, the land investing business is pretty low risk, which is very nice. As far as barrier of entry as well with cash and time. But the big risk that I think about is, and this is something I never used to think about. I think in this day and age, you really need to diversify. You need to have multiple streams of income coming from different places, and that's something I did not realize up until 4 years ago, or probably 5, 6 years ago, that I needed something like that. That a physical therapist salary alone was not going to help me get to where I needed to get. As you were mentioning, that time 10, 20 years from now, that 10 years is coming no matter what you do. And if I have only my physical therapist salary to rely on, the risk in that is high. So if I can have multiple streams of income, so now I have physical therapist income, which is small compared to what it was. My land investing income, I'm doing a couple other things now, which is exciting. And I'm using my retirement money to invest in land, and so I'm really diversifying. I've really come a long ways in the last 5 years in doing that. So I think that's the biggest risk is not diversifying and not having kind of multiple streams of income.
No, I love it. I think you're right on. I mean, kind of the Kiyosaki, you know, mentality there of multiple streams of income. Uh, Definitely a good idea. Um, and I appreciate you taking that on for us.
Yeah.
Scott, before we wrap up, where can the listeners go if they would like to connect or learn more?
I would recommend you go to thelandgeek.com and spend some time on the website. Mark Podolsky and the community, we have a number of podcasts as well. The Best Passive Income Model podcast. I'm sorry, the Art of Passive Income Model podcast. And then if you're curious and want to talk more to me, you can email me at scott@thelandgeek.com, or you can even schedule a call with me at thelandgeek.com/training.
Got it. Well, Scott, I want to say thanks for taking the time to talk today. I've enjoyed it and learned a lot, and hope we can do it again soon.
Thanks, Darren. I appreciate it very much.
All right. For our listeners, if you like this episode, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Remember, the more you know, the more you grow. That's all we've got this week. Until next time, thanks for listening to Commercial Real Estate Pro Network's CREPN Radio.